Welcome to the agenda briefing work session of the City Council. This is the first of these in-person work sessions in which staff will provide updates and discussions and discuss upcoming agenda items. Mayor Manheimer and Councilwoman Mosley, as well as Shanika Smith, have scheduling conflicts and are unable to attend the work session today. These work sessions will be held regularly on Thursdays before the Tuesday council meeting and are open to the public and available to view the live stream on the city YouTube channel or the city's virtual engagement hub. To listen by phone, callers can call the number 855-925-2801, meeting code 3540. These work sessions are an opportunity for the staff to review and the public to hear issues and concerns from the City Council regarding current and potential future council agenda items. And public comment is not permitted at the work sessions, and council will not be voting on any matters. And with that, I'll turn it over to our city manager to get us started.
Good morning, and I too want to welcome everyone to our first in-person agenda briefing work session, formerly called check-in meetings. The format of these meetings will generally flow the way we have had them in the past, other than that we won't cover any substantive legal issues. Those matters will be handled in closed session or through confidential memos. We will also discuss more items from the 8-week calendar than we've done in the past. And in the past, the assistant city managers usually handle the review of the upcoming council meeting agenda. Our assistant city manager, Ben Woody, has taken some much needed time off to be with family. So our assistant city manager, Rachel Wood, will be reviewing the agenda for this meeting. So Rachel, I will turn it over to you to discuss the agenda.
Thank you, Deborah, and good morning, everyone. In keeping with the previous process, once we get to consent, we're going to cover that by exception. So please note that you're welcome to ask questions on any of the agenda items, including the items that I don't cover. By way of quick reminder, the City Council meeting for February 28th has a special scheduled start time of 4 p.m., so wanted to make sure that was noted for council members as well as the public that is listening. We do not have any proclamations scheduled for the February 28th agenda. So moving into the consent agenda, I'm going to start with item C. Item C is an ARPA-funded project. This is for the Litter and Cleanliness Program. It's actually 2 contracts with a combined total of $500,000. So one of the contracts totaling $300,000 is with WNC Landscaping for roadside litter and hotspot collection. The other $200,000 contract is with SteriClean NC for biohazardous waste pickup. The work is expected to begin March 2023, and sanitation staff will be the primary department responsible for deploying both contractors. Moving on to item D. Item D, I know several of you are very familiar with. This is authorizing the city manager to enter into a $115,000 contract with Opticos Design for the missing middle housing study and displacement risk assessment. As many of you know, Opticos is a highly recommended firm, and I believe the company's principal is actually responsible for coining the term missing middle, so they are definitely an industry leader in conducting this type of work. The contract was approved in a 3-0 vote at the February 20th Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting.
Rachel, we kind of assigned a timeline of roughly a year to that. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And that is an item that's on our organizational work plan, and it's a joint effort between Planning and Urban Design as well as the Community and Economic Development Department. Item F is another good news item. So this is kudos to the Department of Community and Regional Entertainment Facilities. This is a budget amendment to increase the Harrah's Cherokee Center fund budget because revenues have come in much higher than originally forecast. So this is a $900,000 budget amendment for a positive reason because thanks to their great work and the additional programming happening there, we've had increased revenues at that facility. The next item I'm planning on covering is item I. So this is a $39,000 lease agreement. The reason for this lease agreement is the construction of the new 115-unit, 7-story Moxie Hotel. The construction of the hotel has necessitated a temporary closure of the Biltmore parking garage. So the demolition phase was completed on February 8th, and so upper parking levels that had to be closed for that temporary demolition work were reopened earlier this month. This requested lease agreement is for the pour back phase of the construction to pour back that slab that was previously demolished. The dollar value, as I previously mentioned, for this agreement is $39,000, and there are a total of over 400 spaces in the Biltmore parking garage. Staff has done really great work in working with transportation as well as CAPE, have worked with surrounding business owners as well as communicating with the monthly parking subscribers. We have planned that monthly parkers will be able to use any other City of Asheville lot with their passes during construction. They're being notified of that via listserv, and they're also going to receive a 50% discount during the construction period, since the closure period will be for a period of 15 days. The lease agreement stipulates that that closure will be March 25th through April 8th. So the plan right now is that monthly parkers, they'll receive their standard bank draft on March 1st, and then pending City Council approval, will credit back 50% of that bank draft that they receive after City Council action occurs.
Before we move on from the consent agenda, I have a couple questions on item C. So first, I totally acknowledge that waste cleanup needs to be a priority. My question on this is how we fund it, especially because local taxpayers continue to fund sanitation, parks and rec, public safety for our daytime population. So I noticed that this seems to be coming from the ARPA funds. And when we first went through the ARPA fund process, the litter and cleanliness program ranked 67th in our list as far as like equity and feasibility scores. It was tied with public works building upgrades. And we had a lot of other projects that are ranked higher for equity and feasibility. So what projects are we not funding because we're pushing this one up on the list?
I would have to get back with you on those specific details. Some of that occurred while I was out, so
Okay.
We can certainly get back with you on that.
I would like to make a comment on that. Basically, that was one of the things that, when we had the ARPA funds, that I was very, had a strong opinion about, that we needed to clean up the city. And obviously, from a lot of the comments that we're hearing about the cleanliness of the city and how it's actually affecting the overall product as far as people coming and people living. And I think we have to be more conscientious of how we protect the city and take care of the city. And for that reason, I think that's more than enough reason to push it up, because that is the core. It's almost like if you're living in a house and it's never clean, it's hard to get anything done. And I truly believe that the more we work on core services and the cleanliness of our city, it only behooves the citizens, but also the people that visit our city. Because I will tell you that once a reputation is set by any city, and cleanliness is a big factor, then you can see the city actually go down in value. And when I say down in value, not only value as far as tourists, but value as far as people even moving here, because it becomes sort of a bad reputation. So I think that definitely should have been high on the agenda, and it was one of the things that I put forward, and I'm happy to see that we're moving forward with that.
And as I recall, this was an item that council recommended in terms of ARPA funding. Staff submitted a couple of projects related to operational things. This is above and beyond. It is an opportunity for us to quickly respond to trash and litter issues, in particular the biohazard piece. That is a piece that I personally, as your city manager, is very concerned that our staff, who are not trained, to handle biohazard type of material. And by the biohazard, for the most part, these are dirty needles that are on our greenway, that are in our parks, that are in a number of locations in our community. I do not feel that our staff has the equipment nor the skill set to handle that type of material. And so
And
a
maybe
lot
not
of the funding probably will be going into this bucket.
And maybe not even the staffing, right? So Public Works, we're still down. Last I heard it was like 60% down, but
We
we're
are
probably still
very
somewhere.
much
So this
not
is,
having the resources.
I want to layer in that I support this as well. It's critical, I think. I've lived here for decades. I've never seen us quite like this. And if it takes extra effort to get us back to a kind of a standing normal of cleanliness, then I'm supportive. And we did, the city manager is correct, we did actually request this as an item to come back with a recommendation. So thankful to see it moving forward. I didn't mean to interrupt. I had something about the transportation. but
Well,
did you
yeah,
need to
I
finish
have
the
a
thought?
couple other
Yeah, go ahead.
follow-ups. One, I do hear the issue about quality of life, and I also hear the staffing issue about hazardous waste. When we use one-time funds like ARPA funds, it can help us to address those quality of life issues and our water quality issues moving forward. But what is the future funding that we've identified for this once the pilot funding is wrapped?
And that will come through when we do solid waste services plan, and we are thinking longer term about how do we manage this in a much more efficient and hopefully economically feasible manner.
Well, and again, if we're down in Public Works, we can't meet the demand. So this is really how we're compensating for the
Right.
loss of staff, really. I mean, it's not,
Contracting it out.
yeah, we're not saying we're doing this forever, right? It's just,
Well, that is one of the reasons why I asked, what are our anticipated budget surplus areas? What is our overtime, comparing those two? Because if we end up having a budget surplus that we could use for this, then we're talking about really addressing it with our staffing shortage funds. On the other hand of that, we have overtime. So once we have a conversation about that, then we may be able to identify future funding for this instead of competing for ARPA funds. So once again, my concern is that we get the trash and the cleanliness addressed, especially the hazardous waste, for quality of life and water quality, but I want to know where the future funding is coming from.
Absolutely. And that will be something that over time, as we are discussing the budget process, we will be bringing that information back.
Thank you.
I was just going to briefly comment on the transportation part, the parking deck. So did I hear this correct? It's going to be another 15-day period. I understand the first closure ended up being quicker.
It did.
And so we're being compensated for the loss of income and the loss of staff using storage space kind of stuff. And then all the businesses, I did hear from a number of businesses. It sounds like they've all been notified now. Okay.
And flyers are going out. Additionally, there's going to be a press release that will go out on March 1st.
And then monthly parkers got 50% off and can use other decks.
They're going to get credited, assuming this item is approved, they'll get credited on March 1st for 50% off. Additionally, they'll be able to use all city parking decks during that time period with their monthly pass.
Have they said there might be more closures, or is this it?
This should be it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Additionally, I did not mention this, but the contractors will be required to provide security during that closure period. Okay, unless there are other questions on consent, I'll move on. We do not currently have any presentations or reports scheduled, so moving on to public hearings. Our public hearings are 2 straight rezonings. The first, item A, is 234 Hendersonville. This is a request to rezone a single property from office to highway business. The subject property is currently split zoned, and this request removes the split zoning. So this one is relatively straightforward, moving it to consistently being zoned highway business. The second one is for 43 Redfern. The location is right by the West Asheville Public Library. This request is to rezone a single property from institutional use to residential multifamily, or RM8. The property was previously zoned RM8 in 2004. The current property owner, who's West Asheville Baptist Church, is who requested to have the rezoning to institutional CZ. For the purposes of selling, they are wanting to return it back to RM8, and I believe there is a single-family residence on the property now. Item C on the agenda is being continued to March 28th. That's the South Slope Vision Plan. And I know staff is doing a lot of work with community engagement on that, as well as updating some maps. So that's the reason for the continuation there. Under new business, this is primarily going to be an opportunity for public comment on the fiscal year 2024 budget priorities. We've heard the requests from the public as well as from council members to make sure early on during the budget process that residents had an opportunity to provide feedback prior to the city manager's recommended budget. At the start of this item, Taylor Floyd, our budget manager, will provide just a brief overview of some of our community priorities and expectations for service delivery, talking really generally about the budget structure, explaining the difference between the operating budget and the capital budget, for example, and then talking at a really high level about what some of our key revenue streams are. But again, the intent behind this item is really to allow as much time as possible for the general public to provide feedback as we go into the thick of budget season. Also wanted to note on the city's website through public input, there is a survey available where we're also seeking feedback to inform the budget process. That survey is going to be open until March 3rd, and it's being offered in multiple languages: English, Spanish, Ukrainian, and Russian. Any questions on that?
I guess the curiosity I have around this, I wanted to start with thanks, because after 8 years of budget input, this is the first time we're moving this part of the public input so soon. I really appreciate that. I feel heard. And it's a great opportunity to be able to make some tweaks instead of hearing people but not being able to really do anything at the last minute. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We did talk about this in the Equity and Engagement Committee meeting, that staff has spent a lot of time putting this into multiple languages, but then you don't know to look for it unless you can speak English with the way the city's website is. And I wonder if there's a feature for tech to like pin this to the top of the story somehow. Right now, for anyone who's watching, you can go to ashevillec.gov and go to the story section and then click the archive stories and then scroll down and then keep scrolling down, and then you'll find a survey. I think we should move that up to the front because it's really important, and we want to get it done by March 3rd, 3/3.
You got it. We will do it.
Thank you for that. So that concludes the February 28th City Council agenda, unless there are questions on any of the items we have scheduled. And barring any questions, we'll then transition to talk briefly about upcoming City Council committees, as well as this week's Equity and Engagement Committee. So you may recall that you all received a briefing on the February 21st Equity and Engagement Committee meeting, but I wanted to really briefly highlight the strategic partnership grant conversation that we had this week, just to make sure that full council is aware of where we are. So we had a very robust conversation with the Equity and Engagement Committee at our meeting on Tuesday regarding the applications that just went live yesterday for the city's strategic partnership grant program. We had, as you may recall, a pilot program this summer where we limited the scope of the strategic partnership grant program to addressing the opportunity gap for low to moderate income school-aged youth. And so we had a lot of lessons learned as a part of that pilot, and I do want to thank Rachel Taylor and the Community and Economic Development team for taking the lead on this effort. The program, as we discussed on Tuesday, has been very successful, but we want to look at ways that we can make sure we're maximizing the impact of these dollars. So one of the considerations that we discussed with the Equity and Engagement Committee on Tuesday was raising the minimum award amount from $20,000, which is what we had at the pilot, to now $35,000. The median award amount was $36,000 with the pilot program. The Community and Economic Development team's done a great job of surveying the applicants as well as some of the prospective applicants for the pilot program, and the feedback was that that award minimum honestly could have been higher. So that's the reason for that recommendation. We right now are at least going to have the evaluation committee, and we're still finalizing who the evaluation committee members will be. We do plan on having representatives from Asheville City Schools, as well well as a cross-section of city staff on that evaluation committee, that they will be recommending awarding full funding amounts instead of partial funding amounts, and that comes from feedback that we got from agencies wanting to make sure that they didn't have to retool their program if they received partial funding. Ultimately, the Equity and Engagement Committee and City Council, of course, has the discretion to make partial awards, but based on the feedback that staff has received, the evaluation committee will be recommending full award amounts. The last portion of the conversation was around the time period it's taken to execute agreements and then also to have invoices submitted. And so we have several opportunities that are scheduled to make sure that prospective applicants are aware of the expectations. Also want to thank the Community and Economic Development Department for working with several other departments on preparing a lot of sample materials to make sure that the prospective nonprofit agencies who will be applying are aware of the requirements going into this application process. There will be 2 virtual information sessions tentatively scheduled for early March, where prospective applicants can request information, have open dialogue with staff. Staff's also making their contact information available online to answer questions, and there will be a frequently asked questions document posted to the website with materials. But what we discussed with the Equity and Engagement Committee is the need to get those agreements executed in a timely manner, and so we're hopeful that some of this upfront work, having additional resources available to the nonprofit agencies, will mean that the agreements can get executed more quickly. It took a median, I think, of 90 days or more to get the agreements fully executed for the pilot. And so we're wanting to shorten that time period to around 60 days. One, because we want to make sure that the funding is available to the agencies as quickly as possible, particularly for agencies that are going to be providing programming in the spring and summer months. But then also to assist with the administrative burden that it's placed on staff to continue to work with agencies to make sure that those documents are executed. So we are looking at requiring 60 days to have the agreements executed. Of course, if there are extenuating circumstances, staff turnover, staff will work with agencies. It won't be that it's just cut off at 60 days, but the award may be subject to redistribution if the agreement is not fully executed within 60 days. We also had a conversation around a 60-day time period for submitting invoices. We have had some challenges getting agencies to submit their invoices to staff so that we could pay them for their grant awards. So just wanted to summarize that conversation. Also wanted to give you just a quick overview of the timeline. So as I mentioned, applications posted yesterday, and we'll be accepting applications until March 31st. We are going to have presentations from agencies sometime in early April. I know we're working with some calendar conflicts right now, but the presentations will occur in early April. They will be made to the Equity and Engagement Committee as well as to the Evaluation Committee. It'll be one round of presentations. We plan on making recommendations, we being the Evaluation Committee, to the Equity and Engagement Committee on April 18th, and then the recommendations from the Equity and Engagement Committee will be brought forward to City Council on April 25th for funding considerations.
There are a couple things that came up in our equity and engagement conversation that were a little more nuanced around the partial versus full funding. We are looking at whether or not the recommendation could be to do multi-year funding. So when we're looking at addressing the opportunity gap, what would it look like to make some long-term investments and partnerships? On the one hand, and this was my original thinking a few years ago, is if we fully fund partners, then we're really publicly getting behind our partners. At the same time, if we provide partial funding, it allows them to leverage for other funding opportunities. And we might be able to get more dollars to go farther with those kind of leverage points. So I think that one of the things that I was hearing around the table, virtually of course, is that if we're going to do multi-year, maybe reconsider the full versus partial so we don't cut out some of the smaller grassroots organizations. Another thing was when I look at the projections of childcare costs, one of the top recommended applications last year that didn't get funded was the Mother Love program. And when we look at like long-term, what that means for young parents and for workers and for the children that are in the programs as well, going into school and over the summer, these are the kinds of gaps that we're not leaving addressed. So it might be worth going back before we have to make some big issue decisions and look at that conversation to better understand. I know that Shanika brought up several big points around outcomes from the last pilot.
Correct.
Also, I'd have to give a plug for this, and I know, Sage, you had some ideas too. When we have, like, our last quarterly fund for ABC funds our last check was 1.1 million. Instead of that just going into the general fund, as we continue to see historic growth in our ABC revenue, my question is around, should we look for that as a potential untapped revenue source for this kind of programming, so we're not creating scarcity? We could do more in our strategic partnership.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious, and this is probably a Brad question, if it's general fund or if it's going into the general fund as surplus, can we earmark things?
As part of the budgetary process, you've got a lot of flexibility. And obviously, as we go forward, you would have the ability to make amendments to that budget. Where the limitation is going to apply is when we are doing certain things, and I'll define that in just a second, that extend beyond the budgetary cycle. You have a limitation in that you are unable to, the common terminology used is binding future councils.
Right.
The reality is the legal limitation is that you cannot contract away your or a future council's authority to make budgetary alterations. So some of the limitations may take the form of you providing direction with the understanding that there could be alterations by either this or future iterations of the council in the future.
That's kind of what I thought you'd say. So we can really just talk about it in the open budget item. It's not like one of our enterprise funds where like parking used to give $1 million to transit. It's just a discussion we can have each year. Okay. Yeah, the idea that Councilwoman Roney was talking about is that I also was intrigued by how much net profit these stores are making. I think one store made over $2 million net last year. It was a combined net revenue of like $4 million, I think. Anyways, I was digging in. I think Gwen was the ABC liaison or something, and I was digging in with her about what it meant, and it was this higher volume of restaurant-related purchases. So it was restaurants purchasing a bunch of alcohol for their retail environment. We know our sales tax is going up. It's all in there. So one of the ideas, there's currently in the community, AIR and an affordable housing developer are partnering to do this program where workforce housing for restaurant workers and service workers could become a thing. And where would they seek funding? And it was kind of pointed at that ABC fund as a natural kind of tie. That's where that came from. I'm not saying we are looking at that in any way, but just an idea to table. But I thought it was a good one.
And just for context around current funding for the strategic partnership program, after all funds have been awarded for the pilot, assuming the standard $242,000 general fund allocation is approved as a part of the 23-24 budget process, that would give a program balance of $577,500 to the program as it currently stands.
And Rachel, again, just thinking back on the changes that have been made to the strategic partnership funding, it is linked to the achievement gap.
Correct.
Initiatives that are related to reducing that achievement gap.
Correct.
Just wanted to clarify that because we got so far off on another issue.
Yeah, and thank you to both the Housing and Community Development Committee members and now the new Equity and Engagement Committee members for the ongoing feedback. This is going to be a program that will continuously improve. We've come a long way, even just in the last year, but that's thanks to the feedback that we've gotten and your leadership and support in the program.
And I didn't hear this in your report, but we did make a recommendation at our Equity and Engagement meeting to not set the floor as high. I think we had talked about $46,000 for applicant, and we agreed that a recommendation of $35,000 might be a good place to start while we're making adjustments not to reach so far up.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. I just mentioned the 35, which is where we landed, but there was a lot of conversation around should it be 46 versus 35, and we, of course, are going to go with the recommendation of the committee on that.
Thanks.
Okay, so unless there are other questions related to items on the Equity and Engagement Committee agenda for the meeting that occurred last Tuesday, I'll turn it over to Deborah to cover the Environment and Safety Committee meeting.
Thank you, Rachel. So we only have one council committee meeting that's scheduled before the end of the month, and that's, as she noted, Environment and Safety Committee, which I'm staff support. So I'm going to go over very quickly the agenda. We start at 11 o'clock, and that meeting will be on February the 28th. There are 4 kind of business items, maybe 5 with the minutes approval on the agenda, with 2 being public safety, APD-related contracts that need committee action, and referral to full council. The remaining matters are those related to some environmental initiatives, which we do not need any type of action from the committee. They will be updates and a review of a municipal plan. The first public safety agenda item is to review and consider approving a contract with Evidence IQ to renew and amend a current contract. Evidence IQ produces the only automated ballistics imaging equipment that enables immediate scanning of ballistics or gunshot casings evidence. Having access to this information provides law enforcement with real-time, unbiased, forensic-based intelligence to help solve gun crimes. Request is to have approval and forward to full council for action on March the 14th. The second item is a request to enter into a contract with USISS Agency, LLC, who were selected for award after a request for proposal process. This company provides police applicant background checks and polygraph testing, which ensures APD has the ability to quickly onboard as many sworn staff as possible to be available for patrol duties. This request also is scheduled for full council action on March the 14th.
Deborah, if we can, what are some other cities that are using the USISS agency to quickly onboard new LEOs?
I will have to get some information on that. I do not know that. We are going to this process because of the lack of administrative staff that we need to quickly process applicants. So this is, again, like with Public Works, we're having to contract out work in order for us to continue the momentum of onboarding.
And that was going to be my question, because I was going to sort of, if you could elaborate on the process prior to this, was we actually were doing it in-house.
That's correct.
So by actually moving to this particular process now, we can actually, I think it sort of gives us more transparency, and it doesn't give us a conflict of interest as far as how we process and whether things cannot, we do not have accountability, more or less, and responsibility for bringing people on board, because in light of what's going on in the police department and trying to get as many people in as possible, I would think that if we made any kind of mistakes, that we could actually be held accountable, whereas we have an outside process. I think it sort of gives us a little bit more.
What we are doing is trying to be as innovative as possible, as well as being creative to address our organizational needs, and sometimes it is utilizing outside vendors to help support some of the administrative processes that unfortunately we're not able to quickly attend to in-house. So that's kind of where we are, and that's what this particular contract does for us.
You know, some of this makes me think of, I was at a multimodal commission meeting yesterday, and folks were mentioning how there's a bit of a lag sometimes when folks apply to a commission and then get towards a commission, and that's okay, that's natural, and some of it is just a matter of there's only so much volume our delightful 120 or 1,200 employees can do. And so if this seems like a method that will help us with very pinpointed pressure point that we have in getting our police force restaffed. I think it's worth trying something different if an out-of-the-house approach can get there.
Thank you. So the next two items are going to be kind of the environmental initiatives. And the first one is an update on the single-use plastic reduction initiative. And we'll just give a status report on the work that's been done, where we are, and whether we're going to be on track in terms of meeting, having some type of action or recommendation to the committee and then to full council by this fall. The last item is a presentation on our proposed municipal climate action plan, and that plan kind of focuses on internal municipal operations and what the city of Asheville can do in terms of our city operations to help meet carbon reduction and other sustainability goals. That item will come back to the committee for formal action next month and then to full council. And that is the overview of Environment and Safety Committee.
I do want to chime in just to talk amongst peers. I'm super excited about this. The last time we had this plan was in 2008 when the office was founded. And so it's really time to look at all the success we've had and really look at the new climate data and really where we need to go to make sure that our operations and the services we provide are really top notch. Yesterday, 2 days ago, it passed unanimously at the SACE Environment Committee, so there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, and if anyone wants to nerd out in details of the questions, happy to do that, because this is a really exciting thing for our community.
Okay. So I think we are moving to the review of the 8-week agenda, and I think I'm to do that. She's telling me yes. Okay. And I'm just going to talk about what's coming up on the March 14th agenda. Similar to how we do work session items, I don't plan to speak to each one of them, but just to highlight a few that'll be coming to you for consideration. I've already addressed the consent items from Asheville Police Department. Brad will be discussing more detail the opioid settlement just shortly in the agenda. And next month, under the manager's report, we'll provide an update on where we are in terms of ARPA, ARPA funding, status of the contracts and disbursements of the funds. And last but not least, McCormick Field, under new business. That will be our decision. Well, you all's decision point in terms of making a recommendation. I would like to add that we are meeting with Eastern Valley as well as the Oakhurst community to talk about their concerns, if any, in terms of creating a multi-purpose facility. And so we will have information back to you all at your agenda briefing work session. I believe that's on March the 9th before the meeting, so we can give you all an update at that time. That's kind of the direction that you all gave us at the last work session on McCormick Field. And so if there aren't any additional questions, I'm going to turn it over to City Attorney Brad Branham to discuss the first item under other issues and updates.
All right, thank you, Madam Manager, and yet again, good morning, council members. I just have one item to speak to you about today, and I am happy to say that it is an item of good news. You may or may not already be aware of a recent development, so let me start with a little bit of history. As you probably are well aware, beginning in 2021 and flowing into 2022, there was a national settlement with several of the large manufacturers of opioids that was primarily spearheaded by the attorneys general from all 50 states. Several municipalities and counties served as the plaintiffs in those lawsuits, including Buncombe County. It resulted in a $26 billion settlement that was to be paid out to the various states, with the money primarily flowing to local governments, that's counties and municipal governments, over the period of several years in order to provide funding specifically to address the effects of the opioid crisis. The good news, on top of that already good news, is that there has now been a second opioid settlement, primarily with some of the other retailer and distributors of opioids. This settlement, although not quite as large as the first, is still considerable. It equates to $21 billion nationally, compared to the $26 billion from the first wave of settlements. What this means for North Carolina is that we can expect to see approximately $600 million flowing to the state, with the majority of that money coming to local governments in order to continue along the same lines of addressing the opioid epidemic locally. The amount that would come to Asheville is still somewhat unsure, and I say that because the terms of the settlements negotiated by the Attorneys General are contingent upon the percentage of counties and large municipalities within each state that sign on to the settlement. Last time, during the original settlement, North Carolina had 100% participation, thanks primarily to a tremendous amount of assistance from the League of Municipalities, the state, and other organizations that assisted in getting the word out. It is our hope that we can get 100% participation again, because that maximizes the amount of money that flows to North Carolina from this settlement. If we are able to obtain 100% approval from the largest municipalities in the state and all 100 counties, as we did during the first wave, we will get approximately $600 million. What that means for Asheville is we could receive up to approximately 1.2 million additional dollars to add on to the approximately $5 million that we previously received. Now, that may sound somewhat minor in comparison to the total amount, but the money is intended and designed specifically to flow primarily to county governments who house the Health and Human Services function for local governments. In this case, Buncombe County had previously received about $16 million. This additional settlement would give them almost $13 million more on top of that. Now, again, this is going to flow over multiple years, but as with the previous settlement, it would be front-loaded. So a lot of this money comes in quick, and it would be combined with the money that's already coming in from the initial settlement. In order to make this a reality, we will need council approval to authorize me, as you did previously, to work with the Attorney General's office and the state settlement facilitator in order to execute all the necessary documents. So I will be coming to you specifically on the 14th to ask for that authorization and authority to enter into this settlement so that we can obtain the right to get these additional funds. If we do that, we can expect the money to begin flowing fairly quickly. It is anticipated that the first payments from Wave 2 would start to arrive in the second half of 2023. So later this year, we could begin seeing money both to Asheville as well as to Buncombe County for this.
Has anyone noticed if the county's talking about this already? I haven't heard anything.
This is fairly new.
Okay.
I think that they are aware of it. I haven't had a chance to speak directly to the county attorney on this yet, but we do have the option to do quite a bit of coordination, as we previously did, in order to determine the best and most effective use of those funds. So I suspect that they will likely be speaking about it very soon. The deadline for all local governments to sign on to this is April the 18th. So we need to get this in front of all the boards as soon as possible.
When we looked at this last time, we were looking at a significantly greater sum for the first settlement. And I remember the conversation being about, we can enter into this agreement, we're going to anticipate, I want to say it was over 10. We came at 1. So
yeah.
It's like, if we don't have a chance to leverage in the future, we're giving up all future leveraging for funds, and we are going to get a small amount. Like, are other cities having pause because of that change?
The original proposal, as this was being worked out, and there was a tremendous amount of negotiation going on at the level of the actual lawsuit, and there was a national lawsuit going through the federal court system. And really, there were multiple suits, but the primary one filed by municipalities and states dealt with the actual settlement first. So we had an idea of what the total settlement was going to be. We then got a level more granular into terms of how much would be flowing to each state. There was a final detail that decided that the majority of the money, instead of being split sort of evenly between all local governments, would flow primarily to the county governments. And again, that was based upon the sense that as the housers of Health and Human Services, they might be the primary beneficiary of this money in terms of what they can use it for. So that seems to still be in place this time. So some of that question mark is gone. I don't know that we would be giving up a tremendous amount now that that structure has been determined. The alternative for us here is if we decide not to enter into the settlement agreement, it essentially leaves us with the ability to individually sue these particular manufacturers and distributors of opioids. There are some municipalities around the country that are choosing to do that. Along with that would come a tremendous amount of cost and time and expenditure and certainly uncertainty. It would be our advice from the city attorney's office that this particular settlement represents by far the least cost and most efficient way to partake in the already largely agreed upon settlement. And then utilizing what we did last time, which is a lot of collaboration between the city and the county on how the larger sum, which in total is close to $15 million between us and Montgomery County, might be used.
Yeah, that's why when I'm looking at what other cities are doing and what our options are here, because it is such a smaller number than we had originally talked about, it's going to be really important for us to leverage with the county. Whether it's expanding the community paramedicine program, their port team, working with community organizations like WNCAP and others. Like, I think there's an opportunity for us to leverage this small amount in a really powerful way, but it's not what we had originally hoped for the deep need in our community.
The good news is that in total, with the county, the amount to be received here amongst the two settlements is more than $30 million throughout this settlement. So there's a tremendous...
Over what period of time?
I believe that the total time frame, we'll have to relate this back to the original settlement, which I think was late 2021, is about something like 14 years, but the vast majority of the money is front-loaded. So most of the funds come in early, and then that trickles off as we get further into it. So we will be receiving money either from the city or the county standpoint for several years to come, but this will come close to essentially doubling the payments in each iteration of that.
Unless we absorb it with costs like consultants.
Exactly, and I will just add one additional note to this. There is the option of essentially allowing your money as a city who, again, in all cases, municipalities are receiving the smaller amount, can simply divert your money to the county and add it to their funds. What that would do is remove the city's obligation to go through the reporting requirements of this and allow them to, them being the county, to handle the full administration of the additional funds.
And that's what I'm seeing some other cities are doing, is that leveraging, because then we don't deplete the funds with our overhead costs.
Well, and it seems so critical. I mean, I'm thrilled these dollars are coming into the community, but I feel like they're best held at the county anyways. I mean, I don't even think we have anybody on staff at the city of Asheville who has health in their title. Like, we don't, health is not really our thing, and I love that we're embracing it as something that we need to start being more aware of and concerned about and focused on, but it really, to me, has always landed with the county and the healthcare that they already, just have in their everyday work. So I'm thrilled it's coming into the community. It's great that we'll be able to work with them in some capacity. I'd also be curious to know, if we could defer to the county, if we could get behind what they're working on enough to do something like that. I'd be curious what that looks like.
Yeah, and I would like to say too, we had the opportunity when we went to Raleigh to check out the low barrier shelters. And so we had an opportunity to speak with a lot of the Buncombe County staff and commissioners. And the one thing I can say is they are so on board with moving forward with the shelter and different things and wraparound services. And so I'm sort of, I'm hopeful that they will actually be able to work with the city where we could actually work together. And I think the funds will be used, appropriately for the city. I truly believe that they have
Buncombe County and the city of Asheville best interest at heart when dealing with the opioid crisis, homeless initiative, and things of that nature. So I'm pretty optimistic.
All right, if there are no further questions on that, and do be reminded that you'll see this on a council agenda on the 14th, I will turn the Rachel for the next steps.
All right, thank you, Brad. And this next item is another opportunity for county-city collaboration. Right now, it's pretty preliminary information that I'm going to share with you, and I'll just note that as progress is made on a potential regional transit master plan, we'll be providing updates in future budget work sessions to the Planning and Economic Development Committee, in future agenda briefings, and also potentially in future city managers' reports. But did want to let you know that as a part of the FY23-24 budget development process, you will see a request for a regional transit master plan. The county manager's office plans on having a companion request that will be funded at the county level. Staff have had preliminary conversations. The first meeting actually occurred on the 13th when I know several of us were in Raleigh, where city and county staff met to discuss some planned goals, map out some preliminary next steps, and then also discuss who needed to be the primary members from the two agencies, the city and the county, to discuss this effort moving forward. The next meeting is scheduled for February 28th, where staff will have more detailed discussion around what the scope of this master plan should look like. Again, this is all very preliminary information, but at their February 13th meeting, there was a discussion around at least the scope, including the transition of a potential regional transit system from what we currently have right now, looking at the size of the fleet and the best way to expand, route performance, including frequency and ridership, improvement of services, sustainability, of course, that includes environmental sustainability as well as fiscal sustainability of the transit program, looking at revenue streams that could help support and make the transit system more sustainable moving forward, and then looking at how long this master plan would take from an implementation perspective. So again, this is all very preliminary. We're hopeful that the transit master plan is going to give us a basis so that we can work with city council and county commission on some of those important decisions to potentially include that quarter-cent sales tax discussion as we look at a potential referendum for that in 2024. So just wanted to let you know, groundwork is starting on all of this. You will see a budget request as part of the budget program. Staff are working right now on what that scope of work for the master plan could be, but I don't have any more specific details at this time. We should have more details coming out of the meeting we have next week, and then we'll continue to keep you updated as progress is made through these conversations as well as through budget work sessions.
So that's a little bit different story than what I heard in the transit committee meeting this week, because I heard that there was, I'll use the word enthusiastic interest in the transit committee members being involved in defining the scope. But what I heard was that we weren't at that level yet. We were just looking at funding. So I just want to make sure that if we have an opportunity, especially because we have regular transit riders engaged, but also as an opportunity for public engagement, that if we can get that scope analysis on the work plans, I know the transit committee for one is interested.
Absolutely.
Another thought too is I think there's been a lot of folks in the community thinking about this type of thing, and I think when I hear regional transit from a planner perspective, I think of something kind of different than what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is like a city-county transit. Regional to me implies a bit bigger, and I think since I am hearing a lot of enthusiasm from lots of different players, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that because our community is growing and growing, and being able to service more and more people through transit is important. But yeah, I think that at this really early phase where there are a lot of different goals being floated, and if we will have to make a decision on funding something, we need to get really crisp on what the what is. And even hearing regional transit, I'm like, are we going to include Hendersonville? Because that is what regional implies to me. So perhaps getting more precise. Really, this is a city-county conversation, which is awesome, and I'm thrilled that there's enough interest to go towards that. But I think, again, this scoping phase will help tease out some of these things so that we just get more and more clear, so that when it comes to us for budget considerations, there's real alignment in a path that has focus.
Yeah, those points are all very well made, and we'll be working on a communication and engagement plan that will include very extensive stakeholder engagement. And then, of course, the whole intent behind this master plan is for the agency that's selected to do this study to give us recommendations on what will be the most effective transit system and help us define what regional even looks like, to your point, Councilmember Ullman.
Just out of curiosity, I don't think anybody will know this today, but I'd love to know follow-up. If I recall, ridership had gotten to like 1.9% of the community. This is pre-pandemic. I'd be curious to know how it's panned out since, if that's a stat that we keep.
We can get follow-up information for you on that.
And pointing in that direction, so I know I heard you say a moment ago, we're looking at scope, including increased ridership. And it was in our transit master plan to look at potentially a pilot for fare free. I know that we didn't have the staffing and we weren't maybe ready to do that pilot yet. We had some other higher priorities like the South Asheville routes being doubled, because right now they're like every 90 minutes, and so getting them to 45. Getting 10 p.m. service is a higher priority than fare free. However, if Raleigh and Wake are moving to fare free to increase ridership, and we already know that Orange County and the Chapel Hill area are doing that and have been for a long time, maybe we could look to Raleigh to see, like, we did see that when we were at the Healing Transitions on our recent trip. If they're making that change, what are some of the outcomes they're getting so we know what to expect if we're looking at a pilot in the future as part of the scope?
And we have done a fare-free transit pilot. You might recall my first foray in this local government was as an intern with then Commissioner Brownie Newman, and we did I want to say 9-month fare-free transit pilot. It did not continue, but maybe we have some old lessons learned that we can dig up.
Yeah, I think from a previous professional experience in terms of doing transit master planning and planning, our routes and our development pattern, that is what increases ridership the most. Having key destinations like employment, or those are the things that truly, and having higher density development along transit corridors, that's what helps us with transit ridership, as well as, okay, so I'll explain it again, since you didn't hear it the first time. It is also important in terms of performance, that bus has to come on time when it's scheduled, and those are kind of the elements that help us with increased ridership. But all of those things, we need to look at all kinds of strategies. But mostly, it's about the quality of that trip, and the bus has to be clean. I mean, it's a lot of things that go into increasing ridership.
To go where you need to go.
And go where you need to go. Destinations are key.
Our land use pattern and strategies are so intertwined with this. And as I see the growth pattern that we're experiencing in our city limits and the growth pattern that we're seeing into the county, I think that if we don't start to build the capacity for having a even better transit system that branches outside of city limits, we could really be in trouble in 5 and 10 years with the growth pattern we're seeing out into the county, where we are completely dependent on automobiles. And as last year, for the first time, when looking at North Carolina's carbon footprint, transportation sector surpassed the power plant sector as the biggest section of our carbon footprint in the state. And our growth patterns, our land use patterns, as we have more and more sprawl. And so this is a really big opportunity for us to collaborate, and it is not just a transit conversation. It's a land use pattern, growth, and sprawl conversation that has to be intertwined.
It's
All of those
definitely a
things,
land
and
use
fiscal.
transportation integration.
And fiscal, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I support all of those things in theory. I'm also fiscally concerned about our
Cost per
ability to
rider.
do that, and that's why I asked about the percentage of ridership. I won't be surprised if it's jumped down a little bit to like 1.5. And when I say that, I mean like 1.5% of our population are using it. Meanwhile, we are investing about I could be wrong, $10.5 million a year. And we're relying on the Parking Services Enterprise Fund to also subsidize at $1 million. And we learned that that can't happen this year because it's not doing well. So everybody wants a bigger, more robust transit system, but we also just fiscally can't right now. So, yeah, I just want to layer that in.
Can I add a friendly yet to that?
Yet, sure, just.
Because I think
just a
some of
little
this will
grounding.
also look at revenue sources.
And the other issue with transit is, I really don't know if it's going to ever break even. I don't think any community that provides transit services breaks even, so there is some definitely fiscal, analysis that we'll have to do, but what transit does is provide choice. And that, if you don't have transit, you don't have choices, so therefore you do have to have a car.
Plateaus,
And
right?
a car then adds to the additional cost to be in Asheville, to live in Asheville.
And if I may add a yet, we also know that North Carolina's growing.
Yes.
And in the 10-year projections of North Carolina, 12% of people won't have access to a car. So it's also an equity issue. We're looking at aging populations growing.
Excellent.
Young people, there's going to be lots of young people who can't drive a car yet. There's also our disabled community members.
Absolutely.
So their populations are growing as well. So I think that it's not just who's riding it now, but with land use, we got to find the dedicated funding.
All right. Good conversation.
Which we don't have
Thank you.
yet.
Yes. Another yet. Okay.
Well, thank you for that feedback. I'm now going to let Jade Dundas provide an update on the Independent Review Committee.
Yeah, and on the agenda, we have Water Committee update. It relates to water, but it is the Independent Review Committee.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Vice Mayor, members of council. Jade Dundas, Capital Projects Director, and also serving in the role of administrative liaison to the Independent Committee. So it's going to be a very short update because we've not had a lot of time to be working on this, but we did have the kickoff meeting earlier this week. All 11 members of the committee were able to participate, and fortunately 9 of those members were able to participate in person. The purpose of that meeting was to start building, to introduce the members, start building that rapport, provide some opportunity for discussion around the events, and then also to start creating the dialogue associated with moving this forward to meet council's expectations and the timeline. We are currently working on, with all members, on roles and responsibilities, and really trying to focus on developing a program, a path forward that'll allow us to meet the expectations and the timeline for delivery of the report.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So I believe the next item is upcoming council meetings. I'm going to ask Jamie Matthews if she can review these. And as she is reviewing, Jamie and I were talking earlier today, note to selves, do not schedule these kinds of meetings within 1 week of each other, because you're going to be busy.
Yeah.
And we apologize, but
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
yeah.
But just wanted to remind you all of these upcoming meetings, and like Rachel mentioned earlier, the council meeting on Tuesday will start at 4 o'clock. That is just for this upcoming Tuesday. Tomorrow morning, we have the legislative breakfast. That will be at Hatch Co-working, starting at 9 o'clock. We'll provide breakfast. Y'all can park across the street in the United Way parking lot. And our retreat is a week from today, right? Yes. So that'll start Thursday. We'll start at noon. We'll provide lunch starting at 11:30. So if you want to get there and have lunch.
What are the times? What are the times for it?
It's noon. I had blocked off the full day on y'all's calendars, but as we went through the agenda, and I just updated that on the
I
calendars.
think it says 11:30 now, so 12?
Yeah. Well, 11:30 lunch.
Okay.
And then we'll start with the agenda at noon.
Okay, and I'm like dealing with babysitter stuff, like
Just bring
a
it.
lot, so.
Just kidding.
We would not have that much. Could you just tell me the start and end times, so I just have it really clear as
Yeah, 11:30 to 5 on the first day, and then we'll do 8:30 to 4.
Great.
I have a question about logistics for that. In the future, could we like poll out what is better for all of us around hours? Because I know that for some people, having built-in childcare in the morning, it can be helpful for being able to participate. So for example, we could have started at 9 and ended at 2 or 3, it could have been another option. It wasn't presented as an option, so maybe for future consideration, a poll would be cool.
Yeah, thank you. And again, so those times are 12 to 5 and then 8:30 to 4 in the county building, in that first floor administrative.
And
The
we're
200
parking in their county deck.
I will check on that.
I also have a logistics question for Tuesday. So we're starting at 4. We've put out that we're doing a public hearing around the budget. What happens if an amazing amount of people show up to comment? Do we have a plan for, I know some folks really prepare their comments around a 3-minute time window, or have we communicated different expectations, or will we still stay with that if there's a large number of comments?
If there are a large number of people who come, it's up to the mayor to determine whether there is 2 minutes or an hour or a continuation. And I don't know that it's really a public hearing, so we would just say at the next meeting, we'll continue the.
So we could continue it at another time?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
We just have to add it to the March 14th agenda. But yes, we could. We are thinking that because there aren't a lot of agenda items, that in the first probably 30 to 35 minutes, we should probably get through our normal agenda and then go into that I shouldn't say normal agenda, but the consent items and the public hearings, and then go into new business, which would be the piece for the budget comment session.
Thank you.
And I had a question back on the retreat. What's the agenda? Like, when will we get to see that? It helps me prepare to definitely anticipate, especially for that amount of
I'm
time.
meeting with the facilitator later this evening.
Great.
We should have something out hopefully by Monday, at the latest Tuesday, to finalize that agenda.
It's a lot of work to prepare. Hopefully Monday, because it's a lot of time for us to be there too, and so having advance time for us to prepare and be our best selves
Sure.
is really valuable.
Absolutely. And
will there be
the good thing about retreats is probably, other than deliberation around the priorities, which we're hoping that you all will not change.
I'm actually making that recommendation. That's great.
Hopefully there won't be a whole lot to prepare for, so
Will there be pre-reading materials that we also get on Monday?
No, but maybe go back and read last year's, because we really.
I have,
yeah,
but,
okay.
I guess
no,
it just
I don't. I'm looking at Jamie because unfortunately she's doing all the heavy lifting and scheduling.
So at this point, we'll have much for y'all to review.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we hope that, just generally, day one will be team building. It will be about revisiting our vision. And when I say revisit, it's just looking at it again. Here's our vision statement. Here are our focus areas. And it sets the context for, we said this is the kind of community that we want to work towards. How do we get there? And an important piece of that is how we collectively, as an organization, as well as with the community, work to collaboratively and together to achieve that. So that's kind of the first day. Second day is all about business. Here's where we've been, here's what your priorities have been, and here are the things that have been accomplished. I think one of the things, the challenges for local governments in general is we're always looking forward. We're always trying to do better and achieve something greater and so forth. And sometimes we just don't take the time to look back to say, this is how far we have come, community. And obviously, this is how much further we've got to go, but it's kind of a reflection, a look back at this is what has been accomplished over the past several years. And that level sets to say and inspire, not to pat ourselves on the back. It is to inspire us to do better, to do more, and with more resources, we can get there. So hopefully that provides you, and then we'll be thinking about, should there be different additional priorities? And again, we're hoping there aren't.
Just downtown.
Well,
But that's
downtown
great.
can be covered in a lot of the priorities that you have already.
True, true.
All right, so the last item, if there's nothing else.
Well, I didn't mention
The dinner.
Chamber and the TDA meeting that's on March 1st, next Wednesday. That will be held at Rhubarb. And I think a lot of y'all have said that you want to attend, so we just wanted to highlight and remind you guys of that too.
And that definitely is their meeting. It's not anything that we established from a staff perspective. We were invited to attend. And there will be a dinner on Thursday.
Yes, it's 6:30.
Right, for council. And let's see, I think with that, we will turn it back over to you, Vice Mayor, to adjourn the meeting unless there are any further.
I did have a
further
question.
questions.
That's what I was going to say, if anyone has questions or comments.
Something that came to my attention, and I hadn't thought of it because it hadn't come up in our CIP presentations, is City Hall. Like, what's happening on the top floors? Is it on timeline? Is it on budget? Where does it fit in our CIP and our goals? It's just kind of, I started out in the Zoom square, and now that I'm spending more time and hearing the noise and seeing the changes, I think it would be good to have a conversation about this facility when we're talking about our
Absolutely.
facilities.
You will be getting, as part of our update on where we've been and where we're going, we'll be giving you an update on the budget, where we are, as well as additional information on CIP and the capital facilities assessment and where we are and the implications of both financial and space needs for us to be that high-performing organization that I think we aspire to be. So, yep, long and short, that was a long answer. You will be getting that information through that presentation.
Thank you.
So are there any other comments, or
How do you think this went, y'all?
we're adjourned?
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.